Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily on the Fan Arch Network. John Saponaro here with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. But of course, before we get started, a quick shout out goes to our friends over at Kalshi for sponsoring the video for a limited time. Use the code FANARCHBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10. The Mets dropped this series to the Chicago White Sox in Chicago in excruciatingly annoying fashion because they are walked off twice by the Chicago White Sox. Now, look, we know how much power Chicago has. We know that they have a propensity to hit home runs. We know that they can really, really make a lot of noise in the offensive department. But to lose two games on walk-off home runs and to lose two games, one of which on the strength of Sean Manaea dealing until it falls apart, where it's back to back to back home runs, is so frustrating. To lose a game where Nolan McLean comes out and is your ace. He looks like an ace ascended. He looks like a young pitcher who's really figured it out, who's really right there. It's annoying. It's really annoying. The Mets played well. They didn't play well enough. And this is why I've said time and time again on this show over the last couple weeks, while this run has continued, it's why I've told friends who come over to me at softball, hey, do you think the Mets have a chance to make the playoffs? This is why, not to rain on anybody's parade, but this is why I have tempered expectations time and time again. And it's not because losses like this don't happen to good teams. It's because the Mets don't have the runway to allow losses like this, let alone series losses, to happen to them. It's just they have no room for error. The Mets have been playing on, prior to this series, like a near 700 winning percentage pace. If the Mets play the next 30 games at a 700 and something winning percentage, well then, yeah, they'll probably make the playoffs, and hell, they deserve it. But do you know how hard it is to keep up that pace? Do you know how everything needs to break right? Do you know the just the luck that it takes, the good fortune on top of the good baseball? And that's where this issue pops up. Now, if you want to play devil's advocate and just say one thing to the positive on the other side, it's that, this is a game against the Chicago White Sox. I know this is not records in division and records in the National League don't necessarily factor in the way they do in the NFL, but with the new system, with no tiebreaker games and things like that, it is a little bit of a factor. So if you want to hang your hat on anything, it's a team in another division in another league. And so maybe the Mets can start to get right against what is a much, much, much better team starting tomorrow in the Milwaukee Brewers. But that's where we're at right now. And so it's frustrating. It's a bummer. And again, this is why I've been telling folks, hey, if belief in the Mets being able to go on a run is something that is helping you enjoy this, because this is fun, if that is part of your fun, I have no beef. I'm not going to tell you to not believe, but I am going to tell you to temper those expectations just so that you don't let yourself down. And I think when you watch a series like this transpire, that's exactly why I've been saying it. Now, there is a current Met who a lot of people were wishing was a former Met by the trade deadline, who is also a former Chicago White Sox. And that is somebody who has played a role, and I think played himself into a role on this team in 2027. And that is Luis Robert Jr. Now, before you get up in arms and you say, John, we're not doing this again. We're not paying $20 million for this guy who's always hurt and underperforms. I agree. Let me just say that right there. I agree that there is no point, and it is crazy to pay $20 million for Luis Robert Jr. in 2027. They will not be picking up the option. That is not how this is going to work. But I do think there is a role for this player on this team, and I think the Mets kind of think maybe there is too, which is why they didn't trade him at the deadline for nothing. Now, I think they would have traded him for quote-unquote nothing if a team would have picked up his money, but nobody wanted to pick up his money. So the Mets didn't want to pay him to go away to play for somebody else and also get basically nothing in return. We talked about that in the fallout of the deadline episode. But if you look at what the Mets are on the hook for, which is either a $20 million option or a $2 million buyout, I think if the Mets are smart and savvy, and I think if Luis Robert Jr. is honest with himself and his people representing him are honest about the situation, I think buying Luis Robert Jr. out for $2 million and then turning that into a contract that is somewhere between I don't know, $6 million, $7 million, $8 million, in that range, so that you're getting Luis Robert Jr. in 2027 for, let's say, $8 to $10 million total. That is good value for a guy who is going to do some good stuff for you. Now, again, some of you might jump up in arms and say we don't need to do that. Let me explain why. Luis Robert Jr. would be your fourth outfielder. Now, in a way, he would be your outfielder 3.5, because he would not only be a true fourth outfielder for you, but he's a guy who will give you some insurance against AJ Ewing having a sophomore slump. And we've seen AJ Ewing is kind of out of sorts right now. And remember, AJ Ewing's a really good baseball player, and I think he's going to be excellent. But he's also not shown what Carson Benj has shown. So you do want to protect yourself a little bit in case, again, progress is not linear and there's a little bit of a regression. So you want to keep yourself safe in that regard. You also want to be able to have a defensive outfield that you can run out there that's very strong. And with Juan Soto in the lineup, he's great, but he's not going to give you that strength in the outfield. Now, look, you're also not going to take Juan Soto's bat out of the game with a defensive replacement late, but you could just DH Juan Soto sometimes. I don't know, once a week, maybe not. They'll work it out. But the ability to go to a guy like Luis Robert Jr., who then gives you this unbelievable defensive outfield of Robert, Ewing, and Benj, where you can start to do different things with your lineup and the way you deploy your roster. The other part of it is, as great as Soto is, and he's unbelievable, and as great as Benj has been, and he's unbelievable, and again, with Ewing and the ups and downs, whatever, that's an all left-handed outfield. So having a right-handed hitting complement is smart. Now, some of you will say, well, look, Nick Morabito, who's in AAA, is a right-handed hitted outfielder who doesn't make any money, and he's got speed and he plays great defense. That's true. And I thought earlier in the season that Nick Morabito was probably going to be the fourth outfielder for this team. And maybe he still will. But this is also a guy, your fourth outfielder needs to contribute. Your fourth outfielder is not a defensive replacement player. Your fourth outfielder needs to hit. And I don't know what Nick Morabito is going to do offensively. You need your fourth outfielder to sometimes DH. You need your fourth outfielder to make some noise. And to me, that's Luis Robert Jr. And again, look, if you're the Milwaukee Brewers, we talked about this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Stearns operating the Mets like Milwaukee with money. And that's been one of the biggest issues. It's why you go and you give Polanco $20 million rather than giving Pete Alonso $30 million. But if you are the Mets and you can operate with Steve Cohen's money, and assuming that there's not going to be a salary cap, because there won't be, but whatever. Big market teams with an owner who's not afraid to spend, who has a lot of money, they do things like Luis Robert Jr. will be our fourth outfielder for $10 million a year, because it's about building the best team. And then if you need to go to Nick Morabito for whatever reason, you still have him. The Mets are in a weird situation because they went from not having a lot of depth in their infield to adding a ton of infield depth at the trade deadline that looks like it's going to pay some dividends, to now all of a sudden not having a lot of depth in their outfield as far as the organization is concerned, top to bottom. Because when you look at it, Benj and Ewing graduate this year. Soto is Soto. But now, who else is an outfielder of note? They went and they got MJ Melendez to maybe fill that role. Christian Pache is currently on the team. They traded Tyrone Taylor. Okay, so Nick Morabito is like the only guy on the 40-man roster who can be a contributor. And again, I don't know if you're trying to win that you just say, here, kid, you're a part of this team now. It's important for these guys to earn it. Benj had to earn his way on the team. Ewing had to earn his way on the team. The Mets are not just going to give Nick Morabito the fourth outfielder spot in a 26-man roster spot, not after they've had a down season after a down season, not when David Stern's job is on the line, not when everybody wants and needs them to compete in 2027. So Luis Robert Jr. in this outfielder 3.5 role, this fourth outfielder role, I think is going to be something that you should get used to, because again, he's also shown you that when he is healthy, He might not be the superstar that we thought he was going to be 3 years ago. But when he's healthy, he can catch fire in a blink. When he's healthy, he plays great defense like he did this weekend in Chicago. He hits home runs like he did this weekend in Chicago, and he provides. He might have a month or two next season where he goes off and he hits home runs and he's driving in runs. And that's going to be a big part of your success, much more than I think Nick Morabito can offer you on a consistent basis in 2027. Baseball season is here, and now you can trade every game on Kalshi, and you know what I do. I sit down to record this show, but before I hit record, I pop on over to the Kalshi app and see if I can find something with a little bit of value, or at least something that's interesting and fun. Usually that has to do with our New York Mets, but Mets are off today, so I had to go into the slate of games, and here's one that I really like. The Boston Red Sox are playing the Miami Marlins. The Boston Red Sox are favored. A Miami Marlins win with Sandy Alcantara on the mound is trading at 44%, and I like the value there. It's at 45 cents a share, and that means that $100 will get you $218. Definitely something to keep in mind today. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning that there is no house, and as the probability changes, you can trade into and out of your position. You already know, but for a limited time, use the code FANARCHBASEBALL to get $10 when you trade 10 on the Kalshi app. Kalshi, trade on anything. Must be 18 and over. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. Now, we have to talk briefly about Jeffrey Yon. It seems like it's old news now because this happened a couple days ago, and of course, we don't usually do episodes over the weekend. I did have an episode that dropped over the weekend that I recorded on Friday, but I did want to throw my 2 cents here because when it comes to Jeffrey Yon, the story is great. I talked about it here. I've talked about it on other shows that I've been a part of. The stuff is great. I don't know if the player profile with the amount of walks and everything like that is going to be great. I think he's going to be more of a taxi squad reliever, but I think he's going to have value to the New York Mets over the next several years. I love the celebration. I think it's electric. I think it's wonderful. I think more people should have this kind of fun in Major League Baseball. However, the timing is an issue. And I don't mean the timing like he can't do it every time. What I mean is the literal timing. He's now done it twice. And do I care that he gave up the walk-off home run? Yes. But the walk-off home run did not happen on the next pitch like MajorLeagueBaseball.com and other outlets talking whatever nonsense, talking baseball are going to lead you to believe. The way that this was positioned was that the other night he celebrates too early and then a walk-off home run is given up. It was like 3 batters later. He still did it. I understand that. But it was 3 batters later. It was several pitches later. I think he got an out in between. Like, he didn't celebrate early and then give up a walk-off home run. It needs to be framed in the proper context. But this is the problem when you celebrate something like this. The way his timing works out, sometimes he will throw the pitch and kind of pose on a dime, like immediately after. He has to get into the jump as he finishes the release of the pitch. And it looks really cool if it is strike 3, but if it's not strike 3, it looks really bad. And that is the only issue that I have, is that it's the timing. If he can work this out to where once the strike is called, he can celebrate, I have no issue with this at all. So I'm not talking out of both sides of my mouth when I said the other day that I thought it was great and I thought it was fun. I thought it was exciting. I still agree with all those things. I still stand by all those things, but I don't think that he's going to do himself or the Mets or anybody any favors if he's jumping in the air while the pitch is still in the air, which means it can be a strike, but it can be a ball. It can be hit. It can be hit back at him. He could be putting himself in a literal line of fire. So I just think that, and he talked about this, and Andy Green talked about it, and he said, look, I got to do better. And I think the guy gets it. I really do. But just for his own sake, for the team's sake, they just need to work out this little kink, because I don't want to see the celebration go away. I don't want to see baseball players lose their joy, lose their whimsy, lose their uniqueness, lose what makes them them, So I want to see this continue, but I think the only way it can continue is if he tweaks it a little bit and he figures out a way to kind of lock this in a little bit differently. Now that takes us to our last topic of the day, which is a little bit of an ongoing topic here, but it's worth repeating. And we're not going to dive into the numbers because I hate throwing numbers at you. And we just did a numbers explanation on this the other day. So you can go back and listen to it. But Carson Benj and Nolan McLean over the weekend both strengthened their National League Rookie of the Year cases. I mean, you got Benj hitting a home run left on left, a monster shot. You got Benj going the other way, taking what the pitcher's given him, knocking in a run. Then he's stealing a base. Then he's playing great defense. I mean, Benj is showing you everything in one game, but he did it over the course of the series, really. But he's showing you in one game how electric he can be, how good he can be. And then you have Nolan McLean, who comes out on a Sunday and is unfortunate he didn't get the win, but he just absolutely shoves. And he turns this lineup on their heads, and he's doing electric work. And this is a guy who, if he continues on this pace, he's going to get that ERA under 3. He's going to have 200 strikeouts. He's going to have 180 something innings pitched. It's everything we talked about on the show the other day, where it's like, wow, you know, if you're not careful, JJ Weatherholt, if you're not careful, Sal Stewart, one of these Mets might come up and get this award. And they're both now on a run where it is possible. Again, I don't know how likely, I don't know how probable. If you look at the odds, if you look at Kalshi, you're going to see that there's not a lot of thought that either one of them can win this award based on the probability. But I'll tell you this, both of them can win the award. Now, again, like I said last week, I fall short of saying either one of them will win it, but both of them are making the case. And if you want to talk about joy, if you want to talk about something to watch for, if you want to talk about benefiting the future in more ways than one, because there's also the PPI, the prospect promotion incentive that the Mets would get a draft pick if they're able to get somebody who wins the Rookie of the Year. There's a lot here to watch for the future, even if this season is going to peter out after what has been an exciting couple of weeks of baseball. So don't lose sight of it. We're going to continue to talk about Benj. We're going to continue to talk about Nolan McLean. We're not going to cover it every day, but I probably will touch base on this pretty much throughout the rest of the season at some point. I don't know if it's going to be once a week or twice a week or, just after a really good game. It probably makes sense to do it after McLean starts, something like that. So Nolan McLean will get a start, and then at that point we'll have 5 games, 6 games, representative sample size for Carson Benj as well. But we'll see. That said, that's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, we're sitting at just over 4,000 subscribers, trying to get to 5,000 by the end of the season. We'd love to do it, but more importantly, we would love for you to be a part of the community as we continue to grow. Until next time, I'm John Saponaro. See you tomorrow.